Can he do it again? Mike did it. Billy stops, pops, Billy, the hero, again, a back-to-back nights. Oh, boy. 1.5 seconds, no timeouts. Tyreek at the hole. Oh, my goodness. Cousins gets a touch, but he helped out. That is a man's jam! DeMarcus Cousins nearly brought down the backboard and rim.
You're now listening to the Kings Court Podcast, presented by SatKingsNation.com. Here are your hosts, Vince Miracle and Drew Runberg.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Kings Court Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Miracle, and I played that intro for a reason, because this guy is back. You guys love him. You guys wrote reviews about him. You guys have tweeted me about how much you missed him. And when I said that he was going to be a special guest this week, you guys couldn't help but letting me know you were excited. It's the one, the only, Drew Runberg. Drew, what's going on, man?
I'm doing well. I'm just getting through the dog days of summer. The Olympics provided a good distraction for a little bit, but now it just comes the countdown till October. How are you?
I missed you, Drew. I've missed you. I'm not going to lie. I got Joe over here, and don't get me wrong. I love Joe. He's the nicest guy. You know, we're friends. I see him occasionally every single week when we do this show. But, man, he's kind of high maintenance. You were so easy chill. You know, Joe, he wants a hug every time after every show. He likes to correct me. And on top of that, he stole my outro a couple times. You know, my bye-bye, he stole it from me.
Oh, you got to be hands off the intros.
Outros and intros. He's trying to take them from me, Drew. And I don't, you know, as much as I appreciate him, I don't appreciate that. And that's why I miss you. Not because of your great analysis on the team, just because we both stayed in our own lanes and we synced up very well. Joe, he's just so high maintenance and tries to take everything from me. You want to know why? Because I'm a weenie. I get scared of bigger people, and he's a bigger guy. He can beat me up.
All right, well, I won't touch your intro. I won't touch your outro, but let's see what we can do about the middle tro.
Well, guys, since Drew is here, and I know how many people loved that he's back on the show this week, and I thought this would be a great time to start rehashing some of the older stuff that we've talked about the entire offseason with the Sacramento Kings, and kind of getting Drew's perspective on it all. Now that he hasn't been too close watching the team, but still getting that insight and getting his thoughts on it all. So, Drew, I think we should start with the number one thing, and that is the Sacramento Kings once again have a brand new head coach, and that is Mr. Dave Joerger. Coach Joerger, formerly Memphis Grizzlies head coach. What were your thoughts when you found out the Kings have finally got their new head coach?
Yeah, well, I think that there's kind of two perspectives you can look at it. And you touched on it already, is, another new coach. And anytime I think you bring in a new coach, that's going to be a little bit of a setback, because that means another new system. And granted, that's not as harsh as what you see in the NFL when you got to put in a new offense, new defense. But it is still a difficult thing to transition from one system to another. And Joerger definitely represents a polar opposite system than what we saw with George Karl. Having said that, I thought it was an A. I don't want to say A plus, but it was definitely an A signing for the Kings. I mean, the last time we were talking about a lot about potential candidates. And to be honest with you, as we were going back and forth, it always felt like there was a plethora of candidates. Matter of fact, it was one of the longest lists I think I've ever seen as far as in a coaching search in any sport. And yet, none of them felt like either A, a realistic move in the case of Tom Thibodeau, but B, just not a great fit. And so obviously Joerger shows up, or he gets kind of let go conveniently. And so he wasn't even a candidate in that initial list, but his opening, I thought, opened it up for what was an excellent signing for them. When we look at the Kings last year, they really struggled on defense. They really struggled with discipline. And those, I think, are two key factors that represent Joerger's style. You think about Memphis last couple of years, not the sexiest style of play. It might not be as entertaining of an offensive system, as we've seen the last couple of years, but entertaining doesn't necessarily equate to wins, obviously. So I think it'll be a more disciplined offense, more disciplined defense, and hopefully one that leads to more wins. But I think at the very least, I think we have a good coach that fits maybe not the players, because I think that's also what kind of hampered or crippled George Karl, was that the players didn't necessarily fit the system. I think there's that similar problem here with Jaeger, whereas we still have that grade of defensive players. I think they address that in free agency, and I think we'll get there in a minute. But the starters, the big name players, still need to be good defenders as well. And I think if they do that, that's gonna lead to some improvements. How much? Not sure. I think we'll get to that as well. But I think when you look at how do we improve our weaknesses, I think Jaeger was a great signing as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'll rehash what I talked about when the signing first happened. This was the I can't believe the Kings just got that coach type of signing, in my opinion. I mean, no one thought he was going to be on the board. When Dave Jaeger, what the rumors are is that he requested to at least come and interview for this job, the Memphis Grizzlies decided, you know what, hey, let's just let him go. This is not the first time he's asked for something like this. And now getting this opportunity in Sacramento to really rebrand, not necessarily himself. He doesn't necessarily need to rebrand himself, but rebrand this team and be that leader that this team needed. Because, Drew, I think you agree with this, is that this team's biggest weakness last season was leadership in that locker room and having that disconnect from the front office to the coach. And then I think the only unity you saw from the Sacramento Kings team was in that locker room amongst the players and not necessarily with their head coach. And maybe it was because the team as a whole, from the players' perspective, were against the head coach, and you kind of saw that. So it's going to be very interesting to see Jaeger's approach to that locker room, and now adding the veterans and people who have won player or teammate of the year in Garrett Temple and Anthony Tolliver. I mean, those are strong additions to this team, not necessarily from a statistical standpoint or from on the floor they're going to bring something, but just from the standpoint of they're guys that are going to make sure that this locker room stays in sync. They're going to make sure that their teammates know that they're there for him. Even a guy like Matt Barnes, who everyone knows the notion on him is you hate to play against him, but you love to play with him. And hopefully that carries on, especially at his old age, into the Sacramento Kings locker room. A former Del Campo High School star. That's a Sacramento school out here. I don't know if you knew that, Drew, but bam, throwing some facts at you. But let's go ahead and keep talking about some of these free agency moves here. When you saw guys like Aaron Aflalo, Garrett Temple, the Kings moved away from Rajon Rondo, so not necessarily a free agency move, but now making sure that Darren Collison is that starter once again. What were your thoughts on some of these decisions that Kings front office was making?
I think, and let's I guess this is a good segue away from the coaching. The surprise of the success of Jaeger signing was, and we had talked about this before, is the hard part with Sacramento is, or the Kings organization, I should say, is the reputation that they've kind of established last couple of years. That's come from a lot of player instability, that's come from player unhappiness, but also a lot of instability in the front office, the coaches that we've talked about already that have come and gone. So right now, I think the Kings really need to focus on rebrand, like you said, rebranding themselves, but getting stability. And I think that was another reason for the Jaeger was a big win. Was you don't expect a big name to come to Sacramento via as far as the coaching search goes, and it's the same way with free agency. I mean, I think I went into free agency thinking, it's already tough to attract players to not smaller market, but at least medium market teams. B, it's tough to attract them to non-playoff teams. And then on top of that, C, you have to worry about the Kings' reputation already into that. Do players and coaches really want to come here? And so I had low expectations as far as free agency goes. And so let's dive into it now. I guess it starts with Aflalo, because I think he was the biggest name that came in. And it's a lot of what we talked about with Jaeger in the sense that last year, I think the biggest weakness was, like you said, leadership, but also on the court, it came down to, I think defense was a major weakness, but also that shooting guard spot. And, McLemore never really became what we were hoping he became. Bellinelli was an eyesore. So that shooting guard spot was always a sore spot for this team. And so I think Afflalo, he's definitely not the Afflalo we saw in Denver. He got traded to Portland, had a rough half a year there before signing with the Kings. Had a decent year, but kind of a disappointing year for him last year with the Knicks. And now he is with his third team in less than 3 seasons. So he's not the all-star Denver Nugget Afflalo. He's now 30 years old, but he is veteran. He is very savvy. He is a good defender. And I think that the team will benefit from that. And I think he'll shore up that shooting guard spot. And I think that's a good thing to note there.
Yeah, for me with Afflalo, and I've said it countless times, is Afflalo is a couple years past his prime, and yeah, I guess he's an okay defender, but he's not the defender that you think you'd want to have at that shooting guard spot. I mean, by the way that he's aged and the way that his defense is kind of shown out, he's more of like a big, small forward defender. He's not capable of keeping up with the lateral quickness of a. Let's think of a smaller tier shooting guard, like let's say a Bradley Beal, who again has a quick first step, but I'm not trying to say like a DeMar DeRozan or anything like that. But Afflalo just doesn't have that lateral quickness to keep up with guys like that. His game now predicates him on being able to body up with someone, and he can do that with some of the bigger threes, but more than I think so with anyone from that shooting guard position, especially with how the game is transitioning. He's not the greatest three-point shooter. I don't look at him as a knockdown three-point shooter, but he's capable of hitting that corner three and hitting a wide-open shot. So I guess there you find confidence. My biggest issue, though, is that he takes too many mid-range jumpers. And I'm not saying mid-range jumpers are bad. I think it kind of gets underutilized sometimes in games. I think a lot of people move away from it just because of what the analytics say. But he does take quite a few mid-range jumpers, and he loves to play iso ball, and that's just not his game anymore. And I hope that the Kings understand that, and Coach Yeager understands that, because yes, he's 30 and he's lost quite a few steps aging due to injuries and things like that. So I hope he's a good fit. I will say this, that I do believe that he is that starting point guard come tip-off in October, but I don't see him being that long-term answer, and I don't think anybody else does, especially with how these contracts are set up. And that's where I'm going to continue the conversation here, Drew, on what you would grade, because you and I, we did a ton of grades when you and I were hosting this show. So I want you to grade the acquisitions of this team from a free agent perspective here, and that is, they signed Afflalo to basically a 1-year deal, with that second year only having $1.5 million guaranteed. Same thing with Anthony Tolliver, $1.5 million guaranteed. Then you have Garrett Temple on a 2-year deal that everyone seems to be a little overhyping. And don't get me wrong, I think Garrett Temple is a big acquisition, just because I think he's going to be that point guard when the whole Darren Collison situation gets figured out, which is fine. I still think they need to go get a backup point guard, but again, it's fine for what it is right now. 2-year deal. Matt Barnes, I believe, is a 2-year deal. I don't think I'm missing anybody from the free agent standpoint, but you're looking at all these deals and how this offseason worked for the Sacramento Kings. Again, just from the free agent perspective, what would you grade the Kings on that?
Well, to be honest with you, I think if you factor in realistic expectations, I think you have to give Afflalo, and I agree with all the things you said, I still give that signing an A-, just because I think the Kings are really handicapped in their ability to attract talent, both on the sideline and on the court. But Afflalo he might be a stopgap, but he feels a hole nonetheless. He feels he brings a good physicality, he brings a good veteran presence, and I think he'll bring some good leadership too. And I think he'll fit really well with the level of physicality that Jaeger likes to play with. And I think, I really think the Kings are at a precipice, and I think you could have made this argument going into last season as well, as what's the direction? And that's what I want to see from. If I'm a Kings fan, that's what I want to see from the Kings or any team really, is what's the direction? Are we getting better, or are we not tanking, but are we getting worse essentially? And so I want to see my teams getting better. I want to see a plan, and that's still to me a little bit unclear as far as where they're going right now. But at least for right now, I give the Afflalo signing an A-.
What about all the rest of the signings of a Matt Barnes, a Garrett Temple, Anthony Tolliver, just as a whole for all of the players, not just a flaw, but you can even package him in there as well. Just in general, how would you grade the Sacramento Kings offseason?
Sure. I think overall, I would say a B as far as free agency goes. I mean, I don't really put much into Barnes, but I don't think they put much into him financially, so that's fine. Tolliver and Temple, they're kind of shrugs. I mean, you have to appreciate, like what you said, what they bring in the intangible field. But I think what's going to really win games is who's on the court and who's contributing. And I think that's where I Tolliver and Temple kind of rule themselves out. And again, Barnes, he's going to be 36. He'll turn 37 next March, in the middle of next season. I don't really have high expectations for him. So really, the only significant signing I see here is Aflalo. But I also think where the Kings did do well, and I think contributes to their good grade, is as the bullets dodged. I think they moved on from Rondo. I think that was a good signing, and they avoided signing Dion Waiters, which I think was another great thing. Because if you look at when I saw that, when I saw the interest or alleged interest in Dion Waiters, I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a Kings thing to do. This is such a Kings signing. And I think if you're a Kings fan, you have to feel pretty fortunate that we dodged that bullet. So no Rondo, no Waiters, and then you sign a good veteran in Aflalo. I think for me that makes it a B.
So I have it as, just if you're looking at the players, I say it's a C plus. Just from the players' side, and I'll get into why I had it higher when I first did this conversation, is from just the player side, the team needed to address the shooting guard spot, like you said, and I think they did do that with Aaron Aflalo and with another player that they acquired in the draft, and we'll get to that in just a second here. But also, they needed defense, and they got that with Matt Barnes. Yes, he's 36 years old, but he just played for Dave Yeager last season on Memphis team. He has still shown why he's one of the best perimeter defenders on this team. Garrett Temple is a good perimeter defender. I think he's going to be very significant to this team going into next season. I think, like I said, I think a lot of people are starting to overhype him a little bit, but he is a good basketball player, and you cannot neglect that and what he can do from the defensive side of the floor, as well as being able to handle the basketball. And he has been working on that jump shot to where he can start knocking down three-pointers. So I'm looking at all that. I'm like, okay, that's a C plus. And then what got me to moving it toward a B was the fact that the contracts worked so that they weren't spending money into their cap going into an offseason. Because let's be honest, this 2016 offseason summer was not filled with that many great free agents. I mean, they could have blew their load on. I'll rephrase that. They could have spent their money on a ton of different guys, and they didn't do that. They were smart. They played with their money the right way, and I think that you have to say that most of this happened because of Ken Catanilla, and I think that was a huge get from a front office perspective, getting him in there and handling the money and working out some of those contracts. So again, I'm going to say overall, I'm agreeing with you. I think it's a B, and I don't think anyone can really argue that. I know people will say, well, they didn't get that much better. They're still going to be a bad team. You know what? I'm not going to disagree with you. If you guys heard the show last week when we did our Western Conference previews, I didn't have the team higher. I actually had them lower than what they already were. And so I'm just saying from a contract standpoint and from the players that they provide and the fact that they addressed needs was why you have to give them the grade of the offseason. They had a good offseason full of acquisitions that made sense for this team going into a new campaign inside of a new arena.
Absolutely. Well, it's sensible. And I think that's you make a good point. This is kind of what I was saying when I say they dodged bullets. I mean, there was a lot of bad contracts handed out, and I think the Kings avoided doing that. And short contracts might mean stopgaps, and I think in the Kings' case they do, but it sure beats crippling yourself for seasons down the road with large, overblown contracts.
Before we move on to players that are on this team already, and then we'll get to the rookies in just a second here. You talked about a rumor about Dion Waiters. What about the most recent rumor that keeps swirling around right now? Buy or sell, Rudy Gay is on the team next season.
Well, I think I'm going to say buy, that he's on the team. I do think, and this goes back to last year, I do think it'd be great for the Kings to trade Rudy Gay, because I think we have seen the best Rudy Gay. And when you look at the Kings last year, you've got DeMarcus Cousins, who's playing all-world type of basketball. You've got Rudy Gay, who's again at his peak, if not past it. You have Rajon Rondo, who's past it. And you've got guys who haven't necessarily reached their peak, or maybe they have, and Ben McLemore. There isn't any kind of up-and-coming players on the roster, and so other than Willie Cauley-Stein, obviously. If you're not making the playoffs with guys who are either at their peak or past it, that's not a good place to be in the NBA. So I think in Rudy's case, I think he's a good candidate to liquidate. Unfortunately, I think there's a big difference right now. There's a big gap, and at least this is what I would perceive is that the Kings view Rudy Gay as more valuable than other teams value him, and so that's always going to make a trade difficult. I think they've gotten to a point where they're ready to trade Rudy Gay, but again, I think they're going to be a little bit too picky and overvaluing Rudy. So I just don't see, because of that, a trade happening prior to the season, although I think it is best that one does.
See, we still disagree there, Drew. We still disagree. Even when you leave, you don't come back with the right mindset on Rudy Gay. I like Rudy Gay, and it's not that I like him just as a player. I just honestly believe he is a good fit next to DeMarcus Cousins. He had that bad season last year, and I know you'll agree with this, is because Rajon Rondo held the ball for way too long. And he kept trying to make him an ISO player, and that's the only thing he was capable of doing. If you remember 2 seasons ago, Rudy Gay was the primary ball handler taking up the ball and not Ray McCallum. So he can initiate the offense. He is a good offensive player. Yes, his ball handling needs to come down a little bit. I think they need to take it down to where he can only do maybe 3 or 4 dribbles, and then he has to look for a pass and try and set him up for more, putting him in the right spot and not making him just work from like the top of the free throw line or the corner of the free throw line and make his way down. But at his position, at the small forward position, where it's arguably the thinnest position in the entire NBA, he is still a top 10 talent there. He is still a top 10 small forward in the NBA. And on top of that, you think about who was a solid small forward that the Sacramento Kings had prior to Rudy Gay. Peja, Ron Artest. Before that, it was John Salmons. I mean, like,
you can say that about a lot of positions, though. Unfortunately.
Well, yeah, but the small forward position, like, it's always been rough to find that guy that fits. I mean, the team had Tyreek Evans, the team had Isaiah Thomas. They had. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but the team had Marcus Thornton, who was at times better than John Salmons. At times, John Salmons did show that he was capable of being a good player in this league for a while. Remember that game where he was guarding LeBron James and actually did his little thing on defending him for a little while when he was with Miami? That was cool, but still, it was John Salmons. This is Rudy Gay. This is a top tier talent, and you don't want to give that away for nothing. And
I'll agree with you that he's closer to the bottom 10 than he is the top 10 for sure. I'd say probably the 9, 10, 11, 12 range in the league. But I think that a lot of that has to do with the like you said, the dried up small forward pool. And I will say, though, I don't think although I love him playing the 4 on offense, I think he struggles defensively now at both 3 and the 4. And I think in the league that really values versatility now, I think that's what hurts Rudy as well, and especially on this roster.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that. His defense has been in and out, and depending on games, I feel like it's kind of a mindset thing for him at times. But I do completely agree with you as well, is that they try and use him as the stretch 4, and I was all about it. Remember when we were talking, I was like, I'm okay with that. We've seen it now, and it just doesn't work. He just can't defend those guys at the 4 spot as much as I thought he'd be able to. And I was proven wrong, and I'll admit that. Drew, you were right, and I was wrong.
So you would buy that he is not going to be on the roster, or that he is?
I'm going to buy that he's going to be on this team, just like you. I just think that the Kings are doing everything that they can to move him. The only thing is I agree with you, is that they want a little too much. I know there's the word going around that the Kings aren't asking for too much for him, but at the same time, they're not going to give him away for absolutely nothing. They're not going to just be like, okay, let's do Rudy Gay for PJ Tucker. That trade's not going to happen. That doesn't make the Kings better at all. I mean, PJ Tucker is a better defender. I'll agree with you on that, but they lose so much offensively. And the only reason why I'm bringing that up is because, I've had plenty of discussions about how I would love the Kings to trade for a Brandon Knight or at Eric Bledsoe. Now, is that realistic? No, probably not. But it's still, that's been my dream trade. And
I think
I want
that's
it to happen.
where I think what will probably prove us both right is that I think fans underestimate how difficult trades are, because it has to benefit not only one team but two teams, and you have to take into account, like we said, direction of the team and what they're looking for and needs and strengths and weaknesses. And as I look around the league, a team that would be, I feel like would be interested in Rudy Gay is that kind of borderline contender team, and so a team, I don't know, maybe like an Atlanta, Boston would be a good one, but they've got their small forward.
I like the Rockets.
The Rockets potentially, but
Mike D'Antoni's going to move James Harden to that point guard spot. The Kings have already shown interest in a guy like Patrick Beverley. So you get Patrick Beverley, I know everyone's going to say, well, what about Trevor Ariza? If the Kings can somehow pull a trade where it's Trevor Ariza and Patrick Beverley for Rudy Gay and Ben McLemore being a sweetener, that'd be great. I just don't see it happening. I'd still be okay with Patrick Beverley and Corey Brewer for a Rudy Gay. And I think that's a fair deal. I think the Kings would get a starting caliber point guard and then Patrick Beverley, who is a top tier defender in the NBA right now, especially around the perimeter.
Top 4 in the position, I'd say. Well, top 5. Let's say I'd say top 5 defender at the point guard position, which is great.
And he's shown that he could be a starter, and he's knocking down that corner 3. So, I mean,
right.
That would be a huge acquisition to get, and it addresses a huge need for this team. And then if you can get a guy like Corey Brewer, who, he's sporadic, he's up and down. I believe he only has 2 seasons left, so that at the same time, you're going to have a high draft pick and a draft that's going to be completely loaded in 2017. I mean, that's where you could possibly search for your small forward, and that's where and that gives us a good transition to start moving on, because we don't want to harp on Rudy Gay for too much longer here. But I mean, then you start looking at the draft, and you can finally find that guy there at the small forward spot. So that's the team that I think, if anyone was going to make any moves, and there's already been rumors that the Rockets are the team that's most interested in Rudy Gay, I think he fits the bill of what that team is trying to do, which is being 7 seconds or less with Mike D'Antoni now at the head coaching spot.
Well, you mentioned the high draft pick next year, and you said last week you guys did predictions, and I don't want to dive into what we did last year, but where did you have them? If the season started today, where do you have the Kings finishing up?
I believe I had them 12th.
In the Western Conference?
Yeah, I had them like 12th.
Okay. Well, I had them 11th, so they got 10th this year. I have them moving down one spot, 11th, being jumped by Minnesota, being jumped by Denver, and I think those are the only 2 teams I had jumping them. What was the other team you had jumping them? The Falcons?
I have the Nuggets, I have the Suns, and I have the Timberwolves.
The Suns were the team. Okay. Yeah, because I kind of thought the Suns. But here's the thing about the Suns is I think they kind of hurt themselves to get better in the long run. They got a lot of young players, so that's why I didn't have the Suns quite jumping them.
Bledsoe and Knight healthy, with Tyson Chandler healthy, and Alex Len with potential. Devin Booker is looking strong, and from the people I've been talking to is that they're potentially going to be looking at him as possibly at times playing that small forward spot, because he's gotten bigger and he has the size to play it. I mean, if that's happening, Brandon Knight, Eric Bledsoe, Devin Booker.
Yeah, 11-12. I think that seems about right, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you look at
it. So let's go ahead and move on to the draft here, because I don't want to keep you too much longer here. We don't know much about the rookies, but let's just say you hear the Kings had the number 8 pick. Was it the 8 pick? 7 pick?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. They traded it down to the 13th pick, and they get a guy where you needed to address a point guard, and you had Wade Baldwin, the only real top-tier rookie that came in to work out for you. You had Denzel Valentine available, and instead you get a center that no one has heard about, not even Draft Express or any of the other drafting websites had him in the first round until the Kings made that trade. And that's Yorgos Papagiannis. When you saw that happen, what were your initial reactions?
Disappointed. I mean, just disappointed. I mean, it was not only is it, I'm not opposed to the mystery pick just because I feel like if you have an NBA job as a scout, you probably know more than I do, and you probably know something there that I don't. It's not so much that as it is drafting a player of the Kings have a ton of holes except one, I think, and that's your center. And then they draft that position, and you can arguably say that they have another center, DeMarcus Cousins, and then they Willie Cauley-Stein
And Kosta Koufis.
And yeah, but he's obviously I think he's a great backup, but he's a backup nonetheless. And then they go and draft another one, and that is by far your deepest position, and probably, and I've always said this going back to last season, I think the center is your least, or should be your least valuable player, and yet now you have what, 4 or 5, and I don't know what Scal's going to play the 4 probably, but it didn't make sense at all to me, and it made me think, well, maybe there's like a trade we don't know about. That trade never materialized. So I was disappointed, and you can't really blame. I guess I don't really put too much into the missed opportunities as far as Valentine or Baldwin, because we still don't know. We still don't know if those guys are. I know Valentine had a great summer league, a heroic summer league, but we've seen guys have great summer leagues before in the past and kind of sputter it out, and then the inverse of that as well. To me, it's not so much who we missed out on, because I think it was a bad draft to not be in the top 5. I think for the Kings, it was a tough spot this year, which didn't surprise me when they moved down. It was just who they picked when they moved down that really surprised me.
And then that summer league play. I mean, you said you were disappointed. That would be the word that you'd characterize for when you saw that happen. I mean, you must have been even more disappointed after seeing the way Papagiannis kind of played. I mean, he had his back against a defender, or his back to his defender, like for 20 minutes just before he can even throw a hook shot. And you can't do that in the NBA. You just can't do that move anymore. And I mean, we saw spurts of him running the floor and being able to dunk, but he has a lot to work on. And I can't remember who said it. I believe it was James Ham, and they did it on the Kings Insider. But they basically said he's a Pillsbury Doughboy. Not saying that he's super soft, but he needs to get some muscle on that big body. And there's going to be a lot of things he needs to work on. Scala BCA looked ready to go. And I think he was a steal for the Sacramento Kings, especially after seeing him play in Summer League. The fact that before Brandon Ingram emerged as that number 2 pick coming out, going into college, Labissiere was that number 2. It was Ben Simmons, and then it was Labissiere. And arguably number 1 high school player. And now he didn't have a great college career, but he fell in the draft. Now he has something to prove. And I feel like he's going to get that opportunity. Just he needs to continue to develop, and he needs to get stronger, because there were times where you saw that ball get ripped out of his hands. And then Malachi Richardson, it's going to be a up and down. He's going to be a D-League type of guy. I'm glad that he's going to get the camp invite and things like that. But he's a no offense. I'm not taking any shots, but he's going to kind of become a wash away player by the time the season starts. Like, no one's going to be talking about him. Same thing with Isaiah Cousins. So funny that there's a player out there named Isaiah Cousins that the Kings just so happened to draft in the second round. Because I remember when Isaiah Thomas and DeMarcus Cousins were together, they always had that baby stuff. So I thought that was kind of funny to get a guy named Isaiah Cousins on the team. But I mean, he got a camp invite. What's he going to be? Again, probably on the D-League team.
Yeah, but I will say though that I like the pick. I think I like the pick of Malachi more than you do. He's a second round pick in a position that
Malachi's a first round pick.
Was he first round?
Yeah, the Kings had 3 first round picks. They got him in the trade when they traded Marco Bellinelli to the Hornets, and I believe he was a 22nd pick. Gotcha.
But either way, he I think he's one of many players that can now play shooting guard on the roster, and we just talked about Aflalo kind of showing that spot up. I would assume Macklemore would be second behind him. So I don't imagine much playing time for him. But you know what? It can't hurt, and I like the versatility that he brings.
See, he's just so inconsistent. I mean, he shot very bad from the field in college, and now he's gonna kind of be just a chucker. He's gonna keep throwing the ball at the rim, and if it starts going in, then he gets hot, then he goes in there consistently. But then if he's cold, he's ice cold, and the ball is not even. I mean, he was throwing that ball into the ocean, he'd miss, and that's how bad he is when he gets cold. But
you know what? I think goes back to the point that this was a tough draft if you weren't in the top 5. And unfortunately, the Kings weren't, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on you look at it, the Kings weren't in the top 5, and therefore they really faced an uphill battle.
And I think this is going to help us move into the transition of Team USA and things like that. But another move that the team didn't make, and I think this is what sealed the deal of the Kings having a okay draft. Like I was not happy with the Yorgos Papagiannis signing, and then or draft either. I was like, what decisions are you making? Does this mean Kosta Koufis is on the board of being traded? Now after seeing Papagiannis play, that just can't happen right now, because he can't come in and play backup minutes. But they got Bogdan Bogdanovic, who just showed how good of a player he can be during the Olympics. And the Kings now have him. He'll be coming over next season. He's going to get paid quite a bit of money, but he is a good player, and you saw why he is a good player. And I think Vlade Divac is right to say he's the best player in Europe right now, especially now that Dario Saric is going to be playing for Philly this upcoming season. But yeah, I think the Kings really lucked out getting Bogdan, and they have, and that's why I think overall I give this offseason a solid B+. And everyone who disagrees with me, I mean, you can let me know at VM Center, and I've heard it countless times when I talk about it, is they're planning for next season. I mean, they know that this upcoming season isn't going to be their strongest season in the Golden One Arena or Golden One Center. I mean, they got Bogdan Bogdanovic coming over next season. They're going to have a high draft pick, whether you guys want to believe that or not. It's happening. They have the chance to have a lot of money and to be able to spend. I mean, Darren Collison's on a contract year. Is he going to come back? I mean, many hope so. Rudy Gay's probably going to be on his way out. Whether he stays on this team throughout the entire season, he's going to opt out, or they're going to trade for somebody for him. That's going to be potential for him. Again, more money for them to spend. They're going to have money. They're going to have young players. They're still going to have DeMarcus Cousins. I think they're building for next season, and I think next season summer or 2017 summer is going to be amazing. But your thoughts on Bogdan, and I'll even wrap this up a little bit heavier here, or a little bit in a bigger packages. What were your thoughts on Bogdan for Serbia? I know he had a poor gold medal game, but Bogdan and then Team USA's play, and specifically DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah, I think Bogdanovic, I think he causes a lot of excitement. Unfortunately, that's excitement for what is it, 2017, which I think makes the upcoming season kind of a poor outlook. And I have him at 11th, you have him at 12th. So we'll see, and obviously we're excited for his arrival. As far as DeMarcus Cousins goes, I think I was glad to see him being on the team. I think it can only help his maturity, and I think that's where you want to see the most growth out of your best players' maturity. Being around those players, being in that climate, being with Coach K. Obviously, he's been on a USA team before and already, but I think that can only help him as far as his own maturity goes. And I think that's what I really look for him to take out of that experience. Obviously I'm not really worried about his legs and how he is going to be coming into shape into camp, because the Kings weren't in the playoffs. I think those other guys like a Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, I'd be a lot more worried about their fatigue coming into camp. But I think for Cousins, I think it probably behooved him physically and to actually stay in shape rather than to get fatigued. I thought he looked really good, though. I thought he looked, he brought what he brings, and that's offensive dominance down low and versatility. And I thought he looked really good off the dribble as well. Obviously posting up, but also dropping back and taking slower defenders off the dribble. And he had a few really nice dunks off that, just attacking the rim. And that's kind of where we talked a lot about his 3-point shooting last season. But I think to me, that's going to be his strength. Not only is overpowering weaker post defenders down low on the block, staying true to that, but also those that can kind of stay with him down low and with his strength, which aren't many, but they can't stay with him off the dribble. And so that was good to see as well. So I was glad to see him make it, glad to see him be a part of it. He seemed like he had a good time. He did struggle, obviously, with foul troubles, but I think a lot of players do when they're in the international. It's a different game in a lot of ways. It's different ways of refereeing a little bit. It's different rules slightly. So the foul trouble was a concern, but that's not a concern I would pull into the regular season.
Yeah, I think Cousins was dominant, and I think everyone's kind of harped on it enough to where, we both don't have to give our thoughts on Cousins. What I will say though is just that he did exactly what you said. He brought exactly what you were expecting. The only thing different that I thought he brought, which was very strong and very good to see, was that he moved very well on the defensive end when he was engaged and when he was getting the ball and when he knew he needed to be a presence. And I'm going to keep going back to this game, that first round in the tournament, when Team USA was kind of struggling a little bit, and that third quarter came, and DeMarcus Cousins put on the pressure from being as a post defender. He wasn't shot blocking. He was just getting the ball out of their hands, putting his hands up, making sure each shot was contested in that low post, and he was being strong down there. And I think that really, turned up the volume for Team USA on the defensive side. And then you saw what Kevin Durant did. You saw what Cousins did. He struggled in Game 2, but then Game 3 he turned it back on. He showed some great passes, and he is very versatile. I think he should have been All-NBA, Team 1 All-NBA, but he happened to be Team 2. DeAndre Jordan just so happened to beat him, but let's be real, DeMarcus Cousins is the better player. But I think I honestly, my biggest takeaway, and I know everyone's waiting for this Bogdanovich spiel that I have. I'm just kidding. No one's really waiting for this, Drew, but I'm going to give it anyways. I thought he looked nice. I mean, he definitely showed his struggles, but he's going to be a nice pickup, and it's something that the Kings would honestly need for this upcoming season. The way he's always looking to help out his teammates. I mean, he does kind of get tunnel vision at times, especially when he has the ball, but he has ball handling ability. I mean, he tried to cross up KD. He didn't know how long KD was and how good of a defender KD was, but he tried to cross up KD. He was throwing some moves out there. He also did it in a very bad angle. He basically did it in the corner, which was like the dumbest place to do some dribbling. But again, the tunnel vision, the being able to, when he comes over, I don't think he's going to come over and be like Bradley Beal or CJ McCollum and just start, getting like 18 points a game. But I think he has the chance to come over and be very effective for the Sacramento Kings team, and I'm very excited to see what he can be. And I think that's the biggest thing you can draw away from a guy like Bogdan is excitement. And I can't wait to see what he'll be in 2017, 2018. So again, not a good outlook for the Sacramento Kings 2016-2017 season.
Well, let's talk about one more thing when it comes to 2016, this upcoming season. And actually, this is the first question I ever asked you, Vince. It came last year, and it was, who do you think is going to be this team's X factor? And before we answer that, last year, I think you and I both had the same answer, in that it was Ben McLemore. And he obviously disappointed, but I think that led to the disappointment of the Sacramento Kings season. Really, we talked about it already. The shooting guard position was a hole all season long, and that's largely because McLemore disappointed. But that brings me to, we're going to bring it back. Here it is, this week's Who Dat Stat of the Week.
You play to win the game.
Not a game.
Hello?
You have to know these things when you're a king, you know.
So I just got done saying Ben McLemore is my last year's X Factor. Before we get to this year's X Factor, I just got done saying McLemore was disappointing as 3-point shooting, or was disappointing. This is going to his fourth season, so he has 3 seasons under his belt now. Which of those 3 seasons was Ben McLemore's best 3-point shooting season?
His sophomore season.
Believe it or not, Ben McLemore's best 3-point shooting came last season. So as disappointing as it might have been, that last season was Ben McLemore's best 3-point shooting. So I hate to call him this year's X Factor because, he apparently shot pretty well last year.
From 3 though, not from the field. From the field too, or just from 3?
I only have the 3-point number in front of me, so it's from 3-point land. But that means to me, I'm not going to choose him this year. But who do you have this year as your X Factor? And let's define it a little bit. X Factor, and this is where it's tough to say DeMarcus Cousins, but I'm going to say difference maker. X factor is the difference maker. I don't know if we can expect so much more out of DeMarcus Cousins, who's already a 99 out of 100. Who is going to be a difference maker? Is Rudy Gay going to make a leap or a comeback season? Is Collison going to excel as a starting point guard? Who is your X factor this season?
Man, first off, I want to say that I never get those damn Who Dat stats right, ever. And that kind of disappoints me. Like, I thought, hey, you know what? He's coming back. He told me that he has a Who Dat stat. I'm going to get it. I've been studying.
It would disappoint me if you did.
All right, so X Factor. I don't think there's a player on this team that I consider. I guess if I had to go player, I guess I'd say Darren Collison. But can I say a coach? Because I think Coach Jaeger is the X Factor, to be honest. I think what he brings from the leadership and making sure this team learns this new system. And honestly, I think he's the coach of the future. So if there's any backlash between Cousins and Jaeger, they're going to choose Jaeger over Cousins. And so I'm going to go with Jaeger as the X Factor. But if I had to choose a player, Drew, I'm going to go Darren Collison.
Okay, so Darren Collison was my runner-up as well. Ultimately, I just don't think he is a starting point guard in the league. I know you disagree with me. I know you love you some Darren Collison.
DC's my boy. Come on now.
For me, it is actually Aaron Aflalo, and that's a lot of the reason why we just got done talking about Ben McLemore. McLemore just never answered the bell, and he like we just found out, shot decently from three-point land, but there's more to being a shooting guard than shooting. And I think that's what Aflalo brings. He brings veteran savvy. He's going to bring some leadership. He's going to bring toughness. So to me, as far as answering some needs, as far as stopping a gap, filling a weakness, Aflalo might not be this game-changing free agent signing, but he does answer a lot of questions that needed to be answered for the Kings. So for me, it's going to be Aaron Aflalo.
Yeah, see, I don't even have him as my runner-up. If I had to choose players, I think I go Collison, and then I think Garrett Temple is going to have a bigger impact on this team than Aaron Aflalo. That's how low I am on Aaron Aflalo. Not saying I don't think he's going to be a good player and a nice role player for this team, but Garrett Temple is going to come in there. He's going to have to play multiple positions, both the point guard and the shooting guard spot, and especially with Darren Collison's situation being so much in the air right now and how many games he's going to be suspended for and how many games he'll be missing and the whole 9 yards on that. So he's going to have to play a big role. And so I think I go Darren Collison as the team's true X Factor for the entire 82-game season. But right away, I think the X Factor, you have to turn to Garrett Temple and say he's going to be filling in so many roles. He's at times probably going to be playing the 3. He at times is going to be playing the 2. He at times is going to be playing the 1. And every time he's on the floor, he's guarding the opposing team's best player. And so that's why I'm talking myself into even moving him above Darren Collison. But I'm going to stick with my initial pick just because you know me. I love me some DC. That's my boy.
Well, I'm not going to stick with my original pick. I'm going to change my pick to say this year's 2016-2017 X Factor is going to be Rajon Rondo because he's no longer on the team. Good riddance. That can only lead to a big improvement.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, before I let you go then, because we're going to start wrapping it up here, Drew, I know you got places to be and people to see because you're Mr. Big Time now. What'd you think about some of these offseason moves? Mainly the one that happened over the bridge in Golden State where you now see Kevin Durant joining the Golden State Warriors.
Well, I've always touted myself as an NBA fan more than any other team in the league. And so for me, I was disappointed because I like as even of a playing field as possible. And to me, when you look at championship contenders, we didn't add any this offseason. We just took one away in the Oklahoma City Thunder. I still think the Thunder are a playoff team, potentially. I think they're 7 or 8, kind of in that area. But they aren't a contender anymore. And I think the NBA is best when it has the maximum amount of contenders. And unfortunately, they dropped one without adding one. The Warriors obviously were already a contender. So to me, I thought it was disappointing. We'll see what happens. I think the nation, I can't speak for California or Northern California, but I think the nation, I would imagine, is going to have some serious Warrior fatigue, especially coming out of last year's win total record, their playoff run, all the Curry hype, all the Klay Thompson hype, all of Draymond Green's noise making. And
they're the villains.
and picture posting. But you know, they were last year's golden child. They go from golden child to villains.
Yep.
But I think there's just going to be some fatigue, and ultimately, I don't think it's good for the league, and so that's why I didn't like it.
Last team, and it's the team you already kind of brought up with Rajon Rondo. What do you think of that new trio out in Chicago? They once said Jimmy Butler's going to have his team. They're going to start rebuilding a little bit, and then they say, scratch that, never mind. Let's go get Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade so the ball stays out of Jimmy Butler's hands.
I thought it was extremely bizarre. I mean, we talked about the bizarre draft picks of the Sacramento Kings drafting big guys when they already have established big guys and why they did that. Well, the Bulls have established, you know, shooting guard. And you know, I guess you can't really. I mean, the Wade situation was really weird. It's gonna be bizarre to see Wade in Chicago, and it's gonna be a bad fit. I hate to say it's I feel like it's an unfortunate ending to the story of Dwayne Wade in the NBA. You know, I know he's got another season. He's got 2, maybe 3 seasons left in him, but I just didn't want to see him end in this weird, bizarre, what is now the world of Chicago. And then Rondo only adds to the weirdness. Bizarre signing. You know, it's a really bad fit all around. And I think it hurts the NBA as well because it hurts Chicago. And I think another thing the NBA really is, when they're strong, it's because, you know, the big markets are strong. And New York has always been a long time disappointing. Chicago has for the last 10 years been really successful. And so I think that's been good for the NBA. But to drop a big market like Chicago, or to have that bizarre fit in Chicago, in that market, I think also hurts the league. So I think I'm with the rest of the NBA in saying that was a really bizarre and disappointing move for them.
You're kind of like E40. You're like, ugh, goodness.
But I'm not trying to get to you.
All right, guys, that is our show. The great and amazing Drew Runberg, thank you for coming back on the show this week. Hopefully we'll have you on sometime during the regular season and continue picking your mind on what's going on around the NBA. I know we're doing this. I don't know if you know this, but I know we're doing this. I don't know why I said that. But we're actually doing a new game now, and it's the Trivia Rumble. And I don't know if you heard the first round. I'm lying. I'm being facetious because I know you did. But but what were your thoughts? And on top of that, would you want to be a contender and possibly start matching up with someone and testing your NBA trivia knowledge?
I'm very open to that. Let me know. Send me some dates, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. And you know the drill, Drew. You know how we end every show. Let the fans out there know where they can find you online, continue their amazing conversation, and start, you know, kind of getting into your personal stuff. Like, what are you doing? Where do you live? How old are you?
Well, I live in the Portland, Oregon area, so I'm actually a big-time Blazer fan. So I'm not really doing much other than enjoying my life as a NBA fan, as I just touched on, but also following the Blazers. I'm not as active as I used to be on Twitter, but I am still on, so reach out to me anytime at Drew_Runberg with any questions you might have, any Kings talk you want to banter or disagree with me on. I'm very disagreeable, so go ahead and reach out to me, and we'll take it from there.
Definitely, guys, go follow him at Drew_Runberg, and also follow me on all social media platforms of at VM Center. Before I go, I would not be doing my job correctly if I did not give a shout out to our show's sponsor. Everyone, go to BrickHouseIndustries.com. Check out all of their apparel, from hats, shirts, and socks. And when checking out, be sure to use promo code KingsCourt, and you will get a 10% discount on any of your purchases. And hey, if you want to keep up to date with all of their new apparel that's coming out, and you don't want to constantly keep typing in that URL, you can keep up to date with all of their new apparel by just following them on Twitter and on Instagram at BrickHouse_IND. Drew, I can't talk, so that kind of sucked. I mumbled through all of that and stuttered through all that. My bad, guys. It'll be better next time. Once again, follow Drew at Drew_Runberg, myself at VM Center, SatKingsNation.com, at SKN Articles. Bookmark the site, once again, SatKingsNation.com. And until next time, Sacramento Kings fans, bye-bye.